welcome to HCA Talks Health. I'm Zena le Roux, and today with us is Louise Digby. She's a registered nutritional therapist, she's a weight loss expert, and also the creator of the Nourish Method. So a very warm welcome, Louise. It's really lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So Louise, you specialize in women between the ages of 35 and 55, right? To help them to balance their hormones and to also repair their metabolism so that they can lose weight for good, but without giving up their favorite foods. It sounds like heaven. So, talk to me more about that specific age range. So, why is it that you work with ladies between 35 and 55? Or what happens to their metabolisms and hormones when they get to that age? Why does it need to be repaired? Please tell us more.
Yeah, so it's this age range because during that time, there is a big shift in your body. Your hormones change, your metabolism changes. And, what I have seen in, my clients is that after the age of 35, 40, it does get a lot more difficult to shift the weight. And a lot of women find that the diets that used to work for them when they're in their 20s or early 30s just don't seem to work when they get into their sort of midlife stage. And obviously, it's very frustrating. And so often, the people that I see, they're working harder than they ever did. They're trying harder than ever to lose the weight. They're in the gym every day. They're eating less than they ever did, but they're still not losing weight. Often they're gaining weight. So that's why I wanted to focus on that area, partly because I just see there's such a need for support there, because so many women are frustrated with just being told, just try harder. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
So that's why I wanted to focus on that area. But it was also just a curiosity of mine, before I specialized in that area. I just really wanted to figure out what on earth was going on and
Yeah.
what we can do about it.
Mm.
Um, so in terms of what's happening, one of the big things that starts to happen is really from our mid 30s, we start to lose muscle mass faster than we were. And if we're not using it, then we lose it. And it becomes more difficult to maintain the muscle mass as well. And that's a really big deal because your muscle is metabolically active. So, what that means is that it burns calories. So, the less muscle you have, the fewer calories you burn, even at rest, even when you're sleeping. And so, basically, your metabolism slows down.
Mm.
So, that's one of the reasons why we tend to find it more difficult to lose weight after that time. But at the same time, our hormones are also starting to shift. So your ovaries start to slow down their production of your sex hormones. And that's a normal, natural thing. We naturally have this decline in hormones, and that starts around your mid 30s and leads up to your 50s. Um, and so during that time, it's normal for us to gain a little bit of weight.
Mm.
Um, but because of modern life and the types of lives that most women have, being very busy, having children, working full time, probably not getting enough sleep, having higher stress levels, all of that exacerbates that natural shift in your hormones and tends to speed it up a little bit or
Mm.
make the hormones fluctuate more during that time. And what that can lead to is a disruption in, again, your metabolism, the way that your hormones are controlling your blood sugars and the way that you burn and store fat. So it's a
Mm.
double whammy with the metabolism and the hormones. And the main thing is that dieting doesn't address either of those issues. In fact, it
Mm.
makes it worse.
Uh-huh.
So that's why so many women find that they do a diet and it just doesn't come off, or the weight goes on.
Mhm. So, in other words, less will not necessarily be more in this case. The fact
Yeah.
that if someone is panicking and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing exactly what I've been doing previously in my 20s, it's not working. They just cut the calories, they do more exercise. So you're saying that that's not necessarily going to work. It's not going to address all of those issues.
Yeah, exactly. And, so often when I'm working with someone, we're getting them to actually eat a bit more and scale back the exercise a little bit, which, could be the amount of exercise or it could be the intensity of the exercise. So often we need more of a self-nourishing or self-care, a more gentle approach to health and weight loss as we get into this midlife stage, because the deprivation and the kind of the punishment that we put our bodies through, just, it isn't going to cut it. It isn't going to get you the results that you want.
Oh. Yeah, so it's kind of the opposite. You need to eat
Mm.
more and exercise less. Does that link in some way to the stress hormones as well? Because I know that stress does have tend to have quite an impact on our weight.
Yeah, definitely. It very much links in with your stress hormones, because if you are under eating, then your body can go into a stress response where essentially you're not getting enough, either enough nutrients or maybe not even enough calories. Sometimes it could be not enough carbs. So it might just be a specific food group. And when you're not getting enough overall, your body, it doesn't want you to waste away. It wants to conserve energy. So partly what it does is it reduces your energy expenditure on other activities, other bodily functions to save energy. But also your stress hormones increase because it's a stressful situation for your body to be in, to not have enough food about. And that rise in your stress hormones, your cortisol levels, is going to be disruptive to your sex hormones, which will not have a knock-on effect on your insulin management and your blood sugar control, and therefore your weight control. But also, when our cortisol levels are high, we end up basically stripping our muscle of glucose, to give us some readily available energy, but it ends up getting stored as fat around your middle. And so we tend to see that stubborn belly fat that is so often the case for women in that midlife stage is linked much more to their stress levels and their cortisol levels, as opposed to overeating or under exercising.
Mm. I'm sure that most ladies listening to this will, it's going to be quite good news for them to know that it's not about deprivation. That's not what's going to really help them to move forward with their goals. And I know that part of your philosophy or method is the idea that women don't have to give up their favorite foods when they're doing this. So are you saying that there's still room for the chocolates and the ice creams in your 30s, 40s, 50s and still being able to be in a good shape? Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, it's about moderation. We
Mm.
can't live off these things, but we also don't need to go to the other extreme of completely cutting out those things. And actually, if we follow the 80-20 principle and have 80% of our food being really nourishing food that's, fresh, whole foods, nutrient dense, then, we can certainly have room for there to be some ice cream, some chocolate, maybe a little bit of alcohol, without it disrupting our system and throwing us off track. And I think when we can accept that and allow ourselves to have that 20% of some indulgences, then it helps us in terms of our mindset as well. It helps us to be more consistent, because when we're telling ourselves that we can't have these things, we want them so much
Oh,
more.
yes.
And then we have them because, life happens and it's very difficult to avoid these things. But then we feel like a failure. We feel like we've messed up our diet. And then what research has shown is that when we feel guilty about what we eat, we're more likely to go ahead and eat even more of it to kind of
Mm,
self-soothe that guilt. So if
mm,
we can prevent that guilt from happening by allowing ourselves to have a little bit of what we fancy, we're probably going to be more consistent and see better results anyway.
I absolutely agree. So that relationship with food is very
Mm.
important, and the mindset we have, so we don't sabotage our results and feel like, you know what, I had a block of chocolate, I might as well have the whole thing, right? And that's
Hmm.
not what we're encouraging, what you're encouraging around this. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I've heard some women specifically talking about a weight set point. You know, it's like it feels like it doesn't matter what they're doing. It feels like their body always wants to come back to restore that balance, homeostasis, right? So
Mm.
tell me more about that. Have you seen that? Do you think that there is something like a weight set point?
I think that there is a weight set point, but I think it's something that is changeable. We can influence what that is. And I think the things that determine what our weight set point is are one, the balance in our body, but also our lifestyle and our habits.
Mm,
Part of the reason why we gravitate back to that same weight every time is because our habits are, even when we try and change things for a while, we tend to gravitate back towards those original
mm,
habits that got us there in the first place.
mm,
So, I think if we can, instead of, doing a diet, instead if we can work on our habits and try to change things for the longer term, then we're not going to gravitate back towards that weight set point because we've actually changed, the way that we do things in the long term rather than just a short term fix that
mm,
is going to be difficult to sustain. But certainly, in terms of changing the way that our bodies work, changing the hormone balance, reducing the levels of inflammation in your body, addressing the balance of bacteria in your gut are all things that are going to help to change that weight set point as well. Because if we can get our bodies working better, then we're going to become better at burning fat, more efficient at burning fat.
mm,
So we're not going to keep getting stuck at that same point.
So it's a combination of our habits to a large degree. It's not purely physiological, but there is
Mm,
also a few things from the physiological side of things that could help to lower that set
yeah.
point, right? Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the strategies that you use. So I know you've shared quite a few already, but before I hear from you, one last thing that I want to ask is what are your thoughts around fasting? I think it's quite a popular method that's also been used by many people for fat loss and weight loss and things like that. So what are your thoughts? Is this something that you typically use in your practice?
So fasting, I think, is a really interesting topic because it's definitely something that's got a lot of research behind it in terms of showing that, it's great for improving our metabolic health. And what the research is looking at is typically men.
Mm,
And it shows that men do lose weight with fasting.
mm,
For women, it doesn't tend to help with weight loss. This is what the research is telling us, but it does help with metabolic health. So lowering cholesterol and improving blood glucose and that sort of thing. What we see in practice is that fasting can be a helpful tool, if you like, or a helpful strategy. But we only ever recommend it once we've got a really good foundation in place. Because if you don't have a good foundation in place, so if you're not meeting your nutritional needs, if you're not sleeping very well, if you're highly stressed, if your thyroid isn't functioning well, fasting is going to make all of that worse
mm,
because fasting is, basically going to make it so that you're eating even less. And that is going to drive up that cortisol response. So drive up your stress hormones, which is very inflammatory, will worsen your sleep. And yeah, so I think fasting, it works well for some people, but particularly for women in this midlife stage, I'd be really, really cautious about it. And I'd really make it the last thing that they add in once they have got their nutrition in a really good place and, they're already feeling good and seeing some progress.
mm. Okay. Yeah, so tell me more about that. So having their nutrition in a good place, what are some of the other strategies that you use to unlock your clients' fat burning potential when you work with them?
Mm. So yeah, we always start with getting a good foundation in place. And essentially what that means is making sure they're eating enough protein, enough carbs, enough fiber, good variety in the diet. And, the diet is mostly based on whole foods, not too many processed or ultra processed foods in the diet. And then also making sure that they're sleeping properly and that they're moving their body in some way regularly. And that looks different for everyone. So I think sleep is massively underappreciated. It's so important. If we're not getting good quality sleep and enough of it, then that is something that again is very stressful for the body, very inflammatory for the body, very disruptive to your hormones, bad for your immune system, which is very important in regulation of inflammation. So I think very often we'll have clients come to us and say, "Oh, I was doing really well. I was seeing great progress. I've suddenly stopped losing weight, but I haven't changed anything. I'm still going to the gym, still eating properly." And once we dig into it, we see that actually they've been getting an hour less sleep,
Oh,
per night recently or something like that. It's enough to really stop your progress in its tracks. So sleep is always a really big priority. And then, on a similar vein, stress management is always a big priority too. And I think so many people don't realize that they are stressed because, you can almost enjoy stress or almost be addicted to stress. It's something that a lot of us thrive on being busy all the time. We feel like we're being productive, we're getting stuff done. But actually, if you're, always busy and you never stop and you're always going from one thing to the next, and you're never really getting any proper rest time or downtime, or maybe me time, time where you're doing things that are just for you and purely for the enjoyment of it, then your body is going to be in that constant high alert, perhaps in fight or flight mode most of the time. And that is something that again is quite disruptive to your hormones, is very inflammatory to your body, and again is going to slow down your progress with your weight loss. So trying to help people to slow down a little bit and get some rest time in is a big strategy.
Oh, yes. So, I mean, you're not just looking at what they're eating, you're not just looking at what they're putting into their mouths or even just,
Mm.
with the movement. It's really a bigger picture that you take into consideration. So, how long do you typically work with someone? Over how long period of time?
It's usually over 6 months, because we find that is required to be able to get the nutrition in the good place, address the sleeping issues,
Mm,
get habits formed. Because, like I was saying before, if we're not working on habits, then you're not going to be making change that's going to last. It's always going to be temporary. So we need to make sure that habits are formed, and that means doing things in stages and kind of taking baby steps as opposed to trying to overhaul everything in the first week or two and then trying to use willpower to stick with that.
mm,
If we take baby steps, break it down, then we don't need so much willpower. It's a lot easier.
mm. So it's about those habits becoming their new normal, right? It's not
Yeah.
just about changing something and then slowly but surely moving back into the bad habits. It's really about becoming your new normal and becoming unconsciously competent in the
Yes.
new way of living, right? Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So how could people get hold of you if they're interested, if they want to find out more? Where can they find you?
So a good place to find me is on social media. So Instagram or Facebook, just search at Louise Digby Nutrition, or my website is louisedigbynutrition.com. And I also have a podcast which is called The Thriving Metabolism, and you can find that on any podcast platform.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Louise. And thank you for sharing all your insights and your knowledge around this, how the metabolism works. And I think it's just really hopeful to some ladies out there who've been really feeling stuck and felt like they've been doing everything to know that there's lots that they can do. They
Mm,
don't have to feel like this is it. They have to
yeah.
make peace with this body now. There's lots that they can do. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
If you have a passion for health and wellness and you would like to make a difference in the lives of others and discover a new rewarding career in health and well-being coaching, visit www.healthcoachesacademy.com to find out more.